hanging half 100 on them at Owen Field, or the run rules on the diamond at Love's Field. We're giving you the breakdowns, the bets, and the hot takes from the perspective of two former OU Athletics employees. You're listening to the Mainline Podcast with Tyler Burton and Adam Jaquez.
Let's go! Let's go! Go!
Let's go. Welcome to the Mainline. I'm Adam Jaquez, Tyler Burton alongside as normal, and a special guest that I'll let Tyler introduce here in a moment, someone that has some connections to an offensive coordinator candidate that Tyler and I are big fans of that Oklahoma could be hiring potentially. We'll go through a couple different candidates a little bit later today. On the show, we'll talk through our score predictions. We'll go through our best bets. Probably won't dig in too much to the Ole Miss matchup because how fun can it be to just basically say, yeah, he's going to be sacked a million times on Saturday. It's not going to be any fun. But Tyler, welcome in. How are you this evening?
I'm good, Adam. It was kind of a tale of two halves, for lack of a better metaphor to use for this past weekend. Got married on Friday night. Very good, fantastic. And then you fast forward about 12 hours later, and Oklahoma gets their ass kicked on Owen Field in what was probably the worst, I don't want to say the most embarrassing loss that I've seen Oklahoma take in quite some time, but they definitely didn't do us any favors as fans. But yeah,
you'll always have that to like bookmark in your mind the very next day after getting married. The worst performance on Owen Field in years.
Yeah, 32-9 South Carolina, and Shane Beamer get the win over Oklahoma in kind of a revenge game for him. But yeah, Adam, let's dive right to it. Obviously, the news coming out of the weekend, Brent Venables finally makes the decision to fire offensive coordinator Seth Littrell. I know that this was something that you and I have talked about as kind of being in the works, something that needed to happen for quite some time now. I know that it's not any stranger to any of our listeners and viewers out there that was not overly pleased with the hire when it was made a few months ago. But this is where we're at right now, and Seth Littrell only makes it 7 games. So we are proud to be joined tonight by Kyle Copeland down there in East Texas. Kyle actually played quarterback for Willie Korn and Jamie Chadwell just a few years ago. So kind of a little bit of insight. He's a diehard Oklahoma football fan as well, follows it as close as anybody. One of the best offensive minds that I know of now as an offensive coordinator down there in the state of Texas. So Kyle, welcome to the program. Nice hoodie.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, I'll set the stage
Adam,
a little bit here.
Dude. You're excited.
Yeah, I'll set the stage a little bit here with Willie Korn and take a look at some of the highlights from his offense and cue it up for Kyle here, who's played for Willie Korn. He's the offensive coordinator at Liberty University. He's had some top quarterbacks under his tutelage, including Kyle, I know, but most people will probably recognize Grayson McCall from Coastal Carolina. Caden Salter, currently at Liberty, has had a top 6 scoring offense in 2023, top 4 in 2021. Is currently the number 9 rush offense in the country right now, was the number 1 rush offense in the country last year. His quarterbacks, not going to maybe put up the biggest, most 500-yard passing games or anything like that, but they are going to be top 15 in the country in yards per pass attempt, like you're seeing here from Caden Salter in a matchup last year against Buffalo. So a really good offense, one that's going to chew up a lot of clock and a lot of time of possession. But Kyle, you had the opportunity to play for Willie Korn and the Jamie Chadwell offense there at Charleston Southern several years ago. Would love to hear kind of your thoughts and perspective as someone that's played closely with those guys.
Yeah, first and foremost, you're not going to find a better human being in the coaching profession than Willie Korn and Jamie Chadwell. And also, Willie, he brings kind of a different mindset to coaching and coaching the quarterback position, especially because he's so relational about everything that he does, which, Coach Venables is also about. And every time you hear him speak about the program, that's kind of the forefront of what he talks about. But no, like you said, Willie, he does a great job in scheme and layering his scheme. And I think the last 5 or 6 years that since they were at Coastal Carolina and transitioned to FBS, I think they've had a top 5 passer efficiency rating in all of college football, Power 5, Group of 5, wherever they've been. But they're going to get chunk yardage in the run game, chunk yardage in the passing game, just because how much they ask the defense to have to defend, how much they ask the defense to have to, honor both worlds in the box and on the perimeter, both in the run and the pass game. It's just an extremely challenging thing for a defense to do. You look at that BYU game, I think Coastal Carolina was outsized about 60, 70 pounds across the board on the front, and they just mauled them. I think they ran for over 350 yards that day on a short notice week. So it's a special offense. Willie's a special coach, special person, and I got nothing but a lot of love for Willie Korn.
Kyle, one of the things that Oklahoma fans, we've grown accustomed to watching this program over the last 20 to 25 years, it's been kind of a combination of the Mike Leach coaching tree and his offensive philosophy, but then you also follow that up with, what we've seen from the Art Briles coaching tree, most notably with Jeff Lebby, who's now at Mississippi State, followed by Seth Littrell and Joe John Finley, that are both very familiar. They kind of run the same scheme. What's the biggest difference that you see between what Willie likes to do at Liberty right now, and then also kind of what the personnel looks like to be able to run that stuff as efficiently as you want it to be productive, if that were to translate into the SEC?
Sure. Yeah. So Willie's system and Coach Chadwell's system, it's kind of one and the same, but it's one of the few systems left in football, in my opinion, that it can morph into what your personnel is. Obviously, from offensive line standpoint, you need some more athleticism than the Art Briles coaching tree, where it's big bodies that pass protect a lot. And have guards that are good enough pullers for their gap scheme and counter scheme run game. But as far as skill players go, it can morph itself. And you kind of saw what it did from Coastal Carolina to Liberty. If you kind of watch that, Coastal Carolina was a lot heavier in the run game, but now with Caden Salter and some really good players at receiver at Liberty, it's a lot heavier on the pass, and the run is probably 60, 65 to 35, 40% in favor of the pass. Just because it's a veer scheme, it's not the new age run the football outside zone with the read and different mesh points. It's truly an old school split back veer scheme that morphs itself into a spread formation and personnel grouping, and that's what makes it challenging on a defense. So it's night and day different from the Art Briles scheme. From a run standpoint, but it's very old school, hard nosed football at its root.
Kyle,
I think that makes a lot of OU fans really salivate to hear that, in terms of like how you're able to run the ball. And there's a lot of triple option elements there that are unique. I think you don't see those very often, but it doesn't feel anywhere close to like the Navy or Armies of the world. It's not gimmicky in a sense at all.
It's the new age triple. And if you look at kind of what Liberty does, they've kind of morphed a lot away from the true triple phase, like the read, the dive, pull, pitch, all three phases, where now it's more, you read the dive scheme, and then you have some sort of a quick RPO on the perimeter to get that third phase of the triple. And that's something obviously we didn't do when I was at Charleston Southern. We didn't have a quarterback that was good enough to do that. But they're doing an extremely good job of it. And then, the play action pass game that they have now at Liberty is just, in my opinion, it's night and day better than just about everybody in the country, maybe outside of Wake with that slow mesh that they do. But it's a very, very good scheme, and it's really tough on defenses. And I don't think there's a defensive coordinator in America that would want to prep for that. And you kind of saw what they did against Oregon in the Fiesta Bowl last year for about a quarter and a half until the recruiting took over.
Mm-hmm. Kyle, I think one of the biggest eye-opening things for Oklahoma fans that we've seen through the first, 6 to 7 weeks of the season, particularly, in the matchups against, Tennessee, Auburn, Texas, and, recently this past Saturday against South Carolina, it's that Oklahoma, we are pretty far behind the 8 ball when it comes to talent on the offensive side of the football, particularly on the line of scrimmage. And I know that, this is a league, talking about the SEC, where ultimately your program's success is going to be dictated about how well you're able to hold up and dominate on the line of scrimmage on both sides of the football. So with Oklahoma being pretty far back in terms of the Alabamas, the Georgias, Tennessee, Texas, you got to throw them in there as well. I would even say the program down in College Station as well is light years ahead of where Oklahoma is right now on the line of scrimmage on both sides of the football. When you look at this, and we can pull this thing back, from a bigger picture here, not just talking about Willie, but maybe, what Oklahoma needs in an offensive coordinator and in an offensive scheme going forward. Moving away from the Art Briles system, where does Oklahoma need to transition to be able to, I don't want to necessarily say we have the coach and the staff that's going to be able to go out there and out scheme, some of these other teams that Oklahoma is going to be playing, because I think that that's really the biggest thing that Oklahoma has been lacking this year, but it's also something that you're going to have to consistently be able to do moving forward year in and year out, because unless Brent Venables and Oklahoma just strike lightning in a bottle multiple years in a row, and NIL becomes a bigger player than what it is, you're not going to be able to put a lineup out there like Georgia, like Alabama, like Texas. So what does Oklahoma have to do from a coaching standpoint going forward?
Yeah, like you said, if you want to change the scheme and go to something that you can kind of plug and play right now in the SEC, with your current personnel and your deficiencies on the front side of things with your offensive line, the easiest way to do it is you don't have to block everybody. And you can do that with RPO based stuff, kind of like what Phil Longo does at Wisconsin now. RPO the box a lot, or you can go kind of a hybrid of it, like, speaking of Willie, you RPO the box and also read the box in the run game, so you can kind of go, you can add gaps in your just standard fronts and standard sets, and you can also add numbers at the point of attack, because you're not blocking a three technique, or you're not blocking the defensive end. You're reading them, which creates issues in the defensive structure, because really nobody does that anymore, and especially the SEC. Gus Malzahn used to do it when he was at Auburn, when he had Cam Newton back in the day. And there's still principles of it, but nobody really fully commits to that. And Willie's system, you read the box heavily. So guys that are used to being, fighting double teams or fighting combos and trying to hat read and those type of things, now those guys are, thinking, oh, I'm unblocked, I'm getting trapped, where's the puller coming from? But they're really and truly being read. So it's something that in a 5-6 day prep week, it's extremely hard to replicate, and it's extremely hard to teach your defensive scheme. So that would be the route that I would go. Obviously, I believe in the system a lot. I played in it, and now as a coordinator, I'm running that current system. And every offseason, I'm in talks with Willie and trying to learn the current evolution of it. And in my opinion, there's not a better system in all of football.
One final question I have for you here on Willie Korn, Kyle. Oklahoma's got 2 quarterbacks on their roster right now. We'll see if maybe either of them stick around, both of them, or none of them. And maybe it's kind of a moot point if Willie brings his quarterback and Caden Salter to Oklahoma, if that scenario does play out. Salter, a guy that did enter the portal briefly last offseason. I don't know if he didn't get the right offer or whatever, chose to return to Liberty, but maybe he's a guy that could be coming along with an offensive coordinator in the future here. But between the 2 quarterbacks on Oklahoma's roster, is there one that is a better fit for Willie Korn and the other isn't? Or do you think both guys could be successful in that offense?
I think both guys could be successful, just because that system lends itself to both guys. I think Haskins is more of like what Grayson McCall was at Coastal Carolina for Willie. And I think Jackson Arnold is more so what Caden Salter is at Liberty. They're 2 totally different quarterbacks, but both of them can have an equal amount of success. Now I think, for longevity purposes in the SEC, both quarterbacks would have to prove that they can throw the ball, and that's something that, in my opinion, both of them have struggled with. But as far as the recruiter, Willie's going to be able to bring in those top echelon quarterbacks in the country, just because he's such a great recruiter, because he can go into any state, any part of a state, any part of the country. He can go and recruit people and relate to them. Willie's had struggles as a player, and he's a big reason why I went to Charleston Southern. He was the only coach on the staff when I took my visit with Tyler. So that struck up a great relationship, and truthfully, some struggles I had that first year, Willie's what kept me playing football, just our relationship and him reaching out. And there's not a better recruiter that you're going to get at a place like Oklahoma than Willie Korn, because obviously the NIL at Oklahoma is not comparable to Alabama, Tennessee, Georgia, those type of places. And he's dealt with that, since NIL has started, and he's continuously recruited at an extremely high level.
Adam, we're going to touch on a few other candidates that Oklahoma, could possibly have on their hot board in terms of offensive coordinator hires. But while I've got Kyle here, he's familiar with Seth Littrell, he's familiar with Jeff Lebby, and he's set in on those recruiting meetings, with Joe John, with Seth Littrell, even with with Brent and Todd Bates. So he's very familiar with kind of what they bring to the table. So Kyle, I want to kind of take a step back here. Obviously, Oklahoma's sitting right now at 4-3 with just. It doesn't seem like there's any end in sight to where this could possibly get any better for the 2024 season. So in your opinion, what's gone wrong? Why are we in this position right now to where, we kind of went unscathed in the non-conference play thanks to a Kip Lewis pick six, where we do have one win in the SEC right now, but Oklahoma's staring down the barrel of the gun right now, possibly going 5-7 with a 1-7 conference play record. So, what's wrong with what Seth Littrell was doing? What is it warranted, all the heat that's on Brent right now? Where are we at right now?
Yeah, I don't like speaking ill about coaches, and especially not staffs. But I think the biggest thing that went wrong with Coach Littrell is one, just their roster was depleted with injuries. That's, first and foremost. And I get from a fan perspective, recruit better and keep players, all that. But the reality is the reality of you give guys a certain number of reps for a reason, because they're your one guy, they're your number two guy, and so on and so forth. And offensively, you lose 5 of your top receivers. That's going to put a damper on your offense. You lose some guys up front, and your running backs are shuffling in and out because of injuries. That's going to have a huge effect on it. But if I want to, put a earmark on the day when things went wrong, it was the day Grandpa Art Browse, goes on the field and plays with his grandchildren. And I get it, Coach Browse, there's people all over the spectrum on him. We don't need to touch in on that, obviously, but 45 minutes after a game, you have a grandfather with a son-in-law and playing on the field with his grandkids. And I understand what Coach Lebby's contract stated, apparently from rumors or whatever, but from what I've heard and all that, you guys have heard, that was kind of the date that they kind of told Coach Lebby, hey, it's time to move on as soon as the season's over with. My opinion is, had that not been done, Coach Lebby probably doesn't go to Mississippi State and take that job, because he was in an extremely good place at Oklahoma, that his next job was going to be a really good head coaching job. Obviously, that hasn't worked out. And then, obviously, I don't know what the hiring process was for Coach Littrell and Coach Finley, but, I don't think that all this is Coach Venables doing. I really don't, because Coach Venables was hired to fix a historically bad defense for about a decade. He's done that, and up until 12 months ago, offensively, we were in a really good place as a program. Obviously, fan bases are going to have frustration when you drop games that you probably shouldn't. But the coaches on the other side, they get paid too, and they recruit and they scheme and things like that. And you're still dealing with kids trying to make plays at the end of the day. So, I think Coach Venables has done a really good job. And the offensive undoing, you can't just point the finger at Coach Venables and even Coach Littrell and Joe John and say, oh, it's those guys' fault, because that's just simply not the case.
Mm-hmm. I think that there's a misconception out there right now. I think that Oklahoma fans have this misconception of what Oklahoma is right now on the national space. And I know that there's a lot of people out there that are already starting to put these coaching boards together, talking about can Oklahoma go out there and pluck away Georgia's offensive coordinator? Can they go into Oregon and take away Will Stein? I mean, call me crazy, but I don't think that there's any coach that would be in their right mind right now, that unless Oklahoma's just all of a sudden going to break out the checkbook and Joe C walks into Brent's office and says, okay, here's a blank check, here's do whatever you have to do to bring in the best possible guys. There's nobody that's going to be coming from a solidified blue blood or top 5 program in college football right now that's going to take a chance and come to Oklahoma right now. Am I crazy for thinking that? Because
No.
I think that a few people are kind of getting too far down the road and thinking that Oklahoma has a realistic chance and going out there and getting a Will Stein from Oregon or a James Coley from Georgia, or maybe even like a Brian Hartline from Ohio State, especially with the amount of pressure and kind of the uncertainty right now on Brent Venables' future as we try to navigate these last 5 weeks of the season. I don't think that there's going to be too many well-established coaches that are going to make the decision that, hey, I'm going to uproot my family, what I'm doing right now that's in a successful spot, and I'm going to go, kind of tie my wagon, to this thing that could possibly be going downhill.
Yeah, you're not crazy in thinking that. My thought is, if you're thinking about, as a donor, pulling the plug on Coach Venables, which I believe, I've told you this numerous times, Tyler, I think Coach Venables is the guy. I think he's the right guy for the job. Like you said, go find another Zach Alley on the offense side of the ball, believe in him, and then instead of pulling the plug and spending $44 million on a buyout, let's put our money where our mouth is and say, hey, we got the right guy in. We believe in our coaching staff. Let's go, help them out in recruiting, and let's put our, NIL where it's more competitive with those upper echelon teams, and see, just see what happens, because every year that buyout's going to, decrease. So, give the staff a real shot to prove if they're the right staff or not. And I'm a firm believer that this is the right staff. Obviously, you got to get offense coordinator in to have the right system, the right fit, and is the right culture fit for Oklahoma, because not everybody's going to be, and that's okay. But no, I think you go find you a guy that Coach V believes in, and the kids are going to believe in, and let's spend that money instead of buying out a head coaching contract 3 years into the deal, which is kind of, in my opinion, what Pavers programs do. You hired the guy because you believed in him. What changed in the last 12 months?
You gave him an extension less than a year ago.
Absolutely. So, like, what's changed in that point? Well, the offensive coordinator changed, and things went sideways. There's been injuries, all that. So did Coach V just forget how to coach in the last 4 or 5 months? Like, that's what you have to ask yourself as a fan base. And you want to look at programs that habitually pull the plug early. That's how Mississippi State goes from being extremely competitive to where they are now, and the list goes on and on. Florida.
Adam, what's your pulse, and what's kind of your take on this, on the current state of Brent and where Oklahoma's going right now with this offensive coordinator hire?
I couldn't agree more with like everything that you guys just said there. I am concerned about Brent because like a lot of people are saying the South Carolina game is kind of a point of no return, and it's concerning. But I also realize, I think, how easy it is to, I don't want to call it easy, but we see it happen all the time. A new offensive coordinator comes in, there's new energy, there's new juice. The portal is not going to be the thing that solves everything, but you can put some band-aids in certain areas and get functional to a certain extent. And so I'm optimistic that could happen for Brent. I still have concerns about like some game management situations. We talked about after the Tennessee game. I stood here on the podcast and asked, does Brent know how to do basic math? Because of one of the point after attempt decisions there. But overall, like, I think like I'm on board with, let's, go through another year. Let's not panic and lose our minds over that, because I just don't see like the other guy out there, unless Saban is calling up and saying, hey, I missed football. But I'm thinking it's the right move to do exactly what Kyle's talking about there.
Well, and back to the game management, every head coach has a guy on his staff that is essentially the game management guy. Like, hey, it's a 2-point play here, or hey, don't burn the timeout, save it for the next down. If we get a stop and it's third and this, hey, this is a go for it on fourth situation. So all that can't just go back on Coach V. He's the head football coach. He's heavy on the defensive side of the ball, obviously. So maybe it falls back on somebody that does ultimately fall back on Coach V. But I'm 100% believer in Coach Venables and what he's doing and the culture that he's brought in. And again, if our offense is just adequate, like what it's been the last couple of years under Coach V, we're having a very different conversation right now. And I think all of us can agree on that.
I think that one of the biggest, head scratching things, and, we're never going to know the answer to this question because we can't peek behind the curtain, but I would like to know how involved Brent is throughout the week with the offensive staff, whether it's putting the game plan together, having a say in, personnel packages, maybe the running back rotation, who's getting a bulk of the snaps compared to somebody else. That would be nice to see. But I think what gets me super frustrated is, you turn on the South Carolina tape a week ago and you watch how they play against LSU. You watched how they matched up against Alabama. It was clear, cut and dry that the two best players on South Carolina's defense was their two edge guys. I think it was Kennard and Dylan Stewart. And the very first play, when you have a tight end room consisting of Bauer Sharp and Jake Roberts that have shown all season long that they do not have the ability to, block an outside linebacker for that fact, much less an edge guy. And your game plan, what you choose to do from the very opening series, the opening bell, is to put Bauer Sharp and Jake Roberts out there on an island against these two elite, top 3, top 4 edge guys in the SEC. I mean, it's a recipe for disaster from the opening jump. And it's just those, head scratching things that, me and Adam here as guys that have never coached, a down of football. We played the game, but I just don't understand how somebody that is as highly intelligent and has as much experience as, some of these guys like a Seth Littrell, like a Joe John Finley, or even a Bill Beanbo, that could seriously sit there and say that our best plan of action to attack South Carolina, let's throw the 2 tight ends out there on the edge and hope that they can hold up a pass protection, against future, first and second round NFL draft picks. So it just doesn't make any sense to me what we're doing. I'm glad that Seth is, I texted it earlier to you guys. Joe John Finley, this is putting a Band-Aid on a bullet hole. I don't think it's going to get any better, and we're just going to have to suck it up for these next 5 weeks and just kind of get through it, because I just don't understand what we've been doing or how involved Brent is with the day-to-day regarding this offense for the last 7 weeks.
Well, back to the offense, though, before I jump off here. There's a lot of Oklahoma fans that say, oh, we don't need to change the scheme because then it's going to take 2 years to recruit for the scheme and all that. But here's my argument to that. Who are you going to get that knows the current offense, which is ultimately Art Brow's system, from 5 or 6 years ago at Baylor? It's that system, right? So who are you going to go get? Well, number 1 would be Jeff Lebby. He's gone, right? Number 2 would be Kendall Browse. That's not happening.
That ain't happening.
Number 3 would be Art Browse. That's really not happening. Number 4 would probably be Seth Littrell and Joe John Finley. Who are you going to get to run this current system as is, that's not that connected to that Baylor staff that everybody despises? Like
Joey Halsley probably is the best option.
Is that the route you want to go, though?
I don't think OU fans do.
It's an OU legacy hire. It's exactly what got us in this position we're in right now.
And I totally agree with Coach Venables, what he said today. Like that needs to be the last thing on the mind about OU through and through, because sometimes that works out and sometimes it doesn't. When it doesn't work out, that's what cuts contracts short.
Well, I think if there's anything that is going to help Oklahoma going forward, as bad as it is right now, like I said, we're in DEFCON 5 right now. This is the worst offense in the Power 4. This is the worst offense that I've seen, excuse me, in my 30 years on this earth. When you see where Texas is at right now, you see where Texas A&M is at, these 2 programs a little further south than you see how well they're doing right now. Oklahoma wants to get to that. I can promise you that it irks Joe Castiglione. It irks the rest of this Oklahoma administration that we're this far behind the 8 ball when it comes to, the landscape of the Southeastern Conference. I would have to think that when this coaching hire, when this search, starts the process, and it probably already has, I'm sure there's certain feelers that are already getting put out there, amongst agents as far as who's possibly interested, who could possibly pick up the phone over the next couple of months. Oklahoma's administration has got to go to Brent Venables and say, okay, here's what you got. Do whatever it takes to get the best possible people in here, regardless of if they have a previous connection to Oklahoma whatsoever, regardless of if you've got to fire a couple of guys that are currently on the staff right now, and again, we're just throwing names out here, whether it's DeMarco, whether it's Bill. You want to keep Emmett Jones, by any means necessary. But I think that you're at the point right now to where you kind of have to throw, allegiances to the side, and you've got to do what you have to as a head football coach and as an administration to put your program in the best position possible to succeed. Because if you don't, then, I'm not saying that it's going to be as bad as it is right now, every year for the foreseeable future, but it's not going to get a whole lot better if you can't dedicate the resources and put the amount of, attention and care into this decision for what it's going to take.
And recruits won't go somewhere where there's an indecisiveness. So as a fan base, Oklahoma needs to understand that, like, support your team, support your staff, because again, recruits are not dummies in today's world. Like they can see writing on the wall. They can see, well, this staff's probably on the way out. I really liked Oklahoma, but I'm probably going to go to, Texas instead, because that staff is pretty stable right now. So, just don't pull the plug to pull the plug.
And just one last thing, Kyle, before you get out of here, where Texas was 3 years ago, I'm not saying that it's as bad as where Oklahoma is right now, but
they lost to Kansas at home.
It can turn on a dime, and it just takes the right guy with the right amount of resources and the, attention and, basically throwing all your chips into the pot and, counting on one guy. And that's what they did with Sark. I think that Oklahoma has the right guy at the wheel. You've got to surround him with the right supporting cast. So we'll see what happens. But Kyle, I appreciate you hopping on with us.
Yeah, man. Appreciate y'all.
Yeah. Thanks, Kyle. Have a good one.
Y'all too.
So we're hiring Willie Korn.
We appreciate Kyle jumping on. We didn't intend to spend the entire time on just one guy. We'll profile 3 other guys here as well. And We won't spend as much time on these as we did for Willie Korn, but we had a guy that played for Willie Korn, coaches high school football in the state of Texas, sits in the room with DeMarco Murray, with Brent Venables on recruiting visits. So had some unique insights there, and we wanted to profile that. So we appreciate Kyle jumping on here. Tyler, let's jump into some other candidates, though. Let's start with Mike Shanahan out of Indiana. I think he's probably the one, probably the hottest name out there in terms of him, along with Kurt Signetti, really in the coaching world. And he's a guy that is not a quarterback's coach. So that's the one knock against him. He is a wide receivers coach, but Elijah Surratt, he's the top wide receiver at Indiana, came with him from James Madison, basically a 1,000-yard guy every year. He's had 1,000-yard receivers throughout his time at James Madison. Had the currently number 3 scoring offense in the country at Indiana. I can't say that enough and be shocked enough at that. I think overall his rushing statistics aren't exactly where I'd like to see them over the course of his time at Indiana and James Madison, kind of in the middle there, top 40 or so, but not like top 10, top 25. Like, I think we definitely want to see Oklahoma to be really focused on the run game. And so that's probably another knock on him. But what do you like about Mike Shanahan and what he's done at Indiana?
Well, you're looking at a guy that from his time in James Madison and up there at Indiana right now at a basketball school of all places having as much success as he has. It's the fact that everywhere that he's been, he's found ways to, churn out yards and score points. So, I mean, obviously it's incredible what they're doing up there in Bloomingdale right now. Obviously coming off of a huge dominant win where they just, kick Nebraska's ass. So that's obviously a lot of fun to see, but there's a lot of light shining on that program right now. There's a lot of people that are going to be interested in this guy, maybe not just as an elevated job, but, taking the OC position, at a school like Oklahoma. But there's also talks, he might be next in line for possibly a head coaching position somewhere else. So there's a lot of light on Mike Shanahan right now. I think that, Ben Arbuckle, Adam, to throw this back over to you. There's a lot of buzz out there regarding the Washington State offensive coordinator. He's had top 15 scoring offenses at Western Kentucky, top 40, I believe, over the last couple of seasons. And it's not the sexiest hire, but at the end of the day, we really don't care about that. We once took a guy that nobody really knew about from East Carolina and brought him in. He was the right guy at the right time, ran the right scheme, and it just kind of meshed with what Oklahoma was doing with Bob Stoops. So, but yeah, Ben Arbuckle is another one out there on the West Coast that a lot of people are interested in.
Yeah, he's coached some really star-studded quarterbacks, Cam Ward, John Mateer, the current quarterback at Washington State. Potential that he could follow him to Norman if that's the route Oklahoma goes. Also coached Bailey Zappi and Austin Reed at Western Kentucky, or at least was involved. He may not have been the quarterback coach for each of those years, but was heavily involved there. Western Kentucky had a very good scoring offense while he was there with the Hilltoppers. So a guy that I don't know if it's just he's benefited from having really good quarterback play, because as you're seeing some of the highlights here from the Washington State-Washington game, it's a lot of broken plays where a quarterback's just making some great efforts here. That's a quarterback draw, of course, that's designed, but has had some really good quarterbacks. Hasn't had the best rushing statistics so far in his tenure. A young guy from Wichita Falls. So there's a lot to like here with Ben Arbuckle, and he's gotten the most out of pretty much every quarterback he's had. Cam Ward's killing it right now at Miami, and that's the guy that he coached up last year in the Palouse. So I think that's certainly a candidate that should be high on Oklahoma's list.
Adam, we've talked about a couple of guys, they're kind of off the beaten path a little bit. Will Stein, the OC at Oregon, James Coley, the co-OC and assistant head coach at Georgia. But it feels like the biggest name right now that's got the most buzz behind it regarding the Oklahoma fan base. And there's a few OU media guys, particularly Parker Thune over at, Inside OU that, think that Brennan Marion is by far and away the best possible candidate that Oklahoma could possibly go after. So what are your thoughts on Brennan and this go offense that they're running out there in Vegas?
He's interesting because when you think UNLV, there's not really a quarterback that stands out. I guess Jaden Mayava, who transferred to USC, I guess you could look at that last year. Brennan Marion really only been a quarterback coach for the last 2 years. Prior to coming to UNLV, he was a wide receivers coach and coached a really good one in Jordan Addison at Pittsburgh. He's the guy that put him on the map there. So I guess all his best players transferred to USC, I guess you could say. I don't know, but UNLV is a really unique offense. It's hard to scheme for. There's a lot of moving parts, different alignments, misdirection that you can use off of that I think really helps them in the run game. Some people will say it's gimmicky. Okay. But I mean, it's effective. It wins. They do score really well, and UNLV doesn't necessarily have the most talent. And even as offensive coordinator, not being the wide receivers coach, he's still developing really high-end wide receiver talent in Ricky Wilson III there that is popping up on the highlight reel for UNLV for those watching on YouTube. But yeah, I'm not sure if he's at the top of my list just because he has jumped around so much. He's only had 2 years experience as a quarterbacks coach and hasn't necessarily developed someone that it really, really stands out in that room just yet. But I think the offense is very interesting.
Yeah, he was at Texas a couple of years ago. I think a lot of people forget about that. And I know that one thing is going to be clear, and regards to Brennan Marion, he's got head coaching aspirations as well. And if they can finish this year as well as they started out over the first 6 to 7 weeks of the season, he's going to have his pick of some possible head coaching jobs. So you have to wonder how realistic that possibly is for Oklahoma, unless you just throw a crazy number out there. But yeah, it's going to be very interesting. I don't think that it's as clear cut. Being able to say that, okay, these are the 3 to 4 guys that Oklahoma is going to, they're going to pursue as soon as the moment presents itself. I know that Dan Mullen is another one that's been thrown out there. GJ Kinney, down there at Texas State, he's probably going to be in Waco here in a couple of months' time. But I think that from speaking for both of us, Adam, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think that Oklahoma, led by Brent Venables, led by Joe Castiglione, you've got to take the approach when you look at this hire to where, if you want to go out there and get an elite level guy, whether it's, from somebody at Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon, I don't think that that's necessarily a realistic option unless it's you just decide that you want to pay some money, which if Oklahoma could go out there and do that, absolutely, I welcome it. But I do think that there is a realistic opportunity where you kind of take the same approach that Bob did with Lincoln, to where you go out there and you get the hot young up and comer that's hungry. It's going to be, eager to come in, make a name for himself, hit the ground running with the recruiting trail, and really kind of inject a breath of fresh air to this Oklahoma offense, something that we've, been looking for the better part of the last 6 or 7 weeks. And I think Willie Korn could possibly be that answer. It is a little different. It is kind of the more run and shoot, a little bit veer-based type offense that he would be bringing over from Liberty. But if you made me kind of cast my vote on who I would want to be the next offensive coordinator in Oklahoma, it's going to be Willie Korn.
Yeah, and we talked about him last December. We're big on him. It wasn't a really long offensive coordinator search, but
Seth Littrell was at the very bottom of that list on the Mainline podcast, let me tell you.
Yeah, but I mean, we're huge fans of Willie Korn. We have the connections to him through Kyle, through my time at Liberty as well. But that it's an exciting offense. I think it's very interesting. It's kind of a curveball without being gimmicky, but gets the most out of its quarterback play and runs the ball really, really effectively. And there's tons of guys. We're only highlighting, these 4 guys in terms of like really kind of looking at their profile on this show, not because they're the top 4 or the only 4 that we want to look at, but because they're probably the most realistic. And you talked a lot about that when we had Kyle on a moment ago in terms of like Andy Kotelnicki from Penn State. He's not going to come to Oklahoma. And I know the argument there is, well, just, give him $2 million instead of $1.6 million. He's not leaving because Penn State has the money to match that offer. He's not going to come hitch his wagon to Brent Venables. As much as we want Brent Venables to succeed and get extra time to turn things around, you don't hitch your wagon to that when you have success at Penn State and you're going to the playoffs already. You're not doing that.
And I can promise you too, Adam, programs like Oregon, that's got the Phil Knight money, programs like Georgia, who are as diehard and they'll do whatever it takes to win football games, they're not going to get outbid by Oklahoma for a coach that has got this program on the right track right now and has played such a pivotal role in getting them to be as successful as they are right now in 2024. So again, you got to make the phone call, you got to gauge the interest, you have to force them to tell you no. But you better have the ability to audible have a backup plan because I think that's where Oklahoma's heading.
Yeah, I know a lot of people have brought up James Coley from Georgia, and I think if the scenario were 1 year earlier when Jeff Lebby's leaving, there's no doubt about Brent Venables' job security. Maybe you get somebody like that to have more interest there because he's not currently calling plays at Georgia. He's thinking, hey, I want to branch out a little bit, own the entire offense, and not have as much of Mike Bobo looking over my shoulder there in Athens. But I don't think the scenario is right for someone like that. And I want to be careful too that we don't just get into kind of a recycle mode, which the SEC can get into that a lot. We saw Will Muschamp jump around in recycle mode, Dan Mullen a little bit in recycle mode. And he's a potential candidate for this offensive coordinator position as well. But I think it's dangerous to just say, well, we can't go outside of this 16 team network. because that gets really challenging because Oklahoma's not going to pull from the best teams really in most cases. They're going to pull from Missouri, from Mississippi State, and so forth. So I think that gets really dangerous if you're closed off to anything outside of that.
Yeah, and again, Cameron Riney brings up in the chat, Dan Mullen, ? We're not sitting here saying that Dan Mullen is going to be, one of the favorites to get this job. I think he's pretty comfortable where he's at right now on TV. And if he does get back into coaching, I think it's going to be as a head ball coach. But again, it is going to be interesting. I think that Oklahoma is definitely going to have to break out the checkbook a little bit, because when you look around the country and you see what some of these premier offensive coordinators are making at some of these high profile jobs. Will Stein's making 1.4 out there at Oregon. Colin Klein, the new offensive coordinator down there in College Station, he's making 1.7 million a year. So again, I think that you're realistically, unless you decide to, go the Willie Korn route, to where you can possibly, maybe only throw $1.5 million at him. If you seriously and realistically want to bring in, a big time name and poach somebody from another program, you're going to be paying north of $2 million. And again, I know that there's a lot of naysayers out there regarding how willing Oklahoma is to spend money in the areas where it counts. But if you want to get to that level, if you want to get up there on the same the upper echelon as Alabama and Georgia, and really where Heupel's got Tennessee at, where Sark's got Texas at, you need to spend some dollars to get there.
Reese Davis would say, let a naysayer know. So I just saw that clip earlier today from the old College Game Day. I guess it was just a year ago there at the Rose Bowl. Good clip there. We're going to probably talk more about other offensive coordinators as the season goes on throughout the last 5 games or so that Oklahoma has. We'll see if maybe we do some more profiles there. Yeah, I saw Randy's comment there in the chat. That hurt because it was true. Saying that many Oklahoma fans think that the Sooners are relevant. It's not the case anymore. It hurts. It hurts because it is true. We are just totally off the radar of relevance right now. Tyler, let's get into our best bets for the week, and then we can round out with our score predictions for Ole Miss, and we can maybe.
Do we have to pick a score? Do we have to pick a score for this?
We have to. We have to talk a little bit about that game, even though I don't think any of us are necessarily looking forward to it too much. But when it comes to our best bets, we pick 5 games every week. It's a weekly competition leading up throughout the rest of the year. Tyler had the biggest lead on me throughout most of the regular season so far until the last 2 weeks where things have really tightened up and there's just 2 game difference between us. Tyler's still in the lead at 18-22. Myself on his heels at 16-24. I guess I go first because I've had the better weeks so far. And I'm going to get us kicked off with a guy that we've been talking about quite a bit. Liberty, Wednesday night Conference USA game. Some people may be watching this show after that game's taken place, maybe listening to it later on. So you might know the result on it. Hopefully you're saying Adam did a good job here, but I'm taking Liberty -6.5 in the first quarter against the worst team probably in all of college football in Kennesaw State. They have a worse offense than Oklahoma. It's surprising. They're probably the only team that is below Oklahoma in offense. And Liberty does have has had some slow starts this year. But I think this is the week that they really get running after having a lot of disruption in their schedule due to games being canceled to weather delays and other games. And now I think the season gets really started for the Flames. So I think they come out hot at Kennesaw State on Wednesday night.
I like it. Pick number 1 for me. I'm going out to the Big Ten, Northwestern, going on the road to take on Iowa. The Hawkeyes currently a 13.5-point favorite. That line has climbed over the last 24 hours by a couple of points, but I think that Iowa's found something here. I mean, obviously, their bread and butter is playing that, hard-nosed, gritty, determined defense. That has not changed up there in Hawkeye territory, and they found a little bit of offense. I never thought as a fan of the Oklahoma Sooners that I would be sitting here jealous of how well Iowa's doing offensively, but this is where we're at. This is the current state of the program. I like Iowa minus the 13.5. They get this team at home. I think that Iowa has a big time win on Saturday. Give me the Hawkeyes.
My number 2, I'm going to the Mountain West, New Mexico, traveling to Colorado State. New Mexico has played a lot of games in the 80s and 90s totals, and some
I like their quarterback.
100. Yeah. So I'm going to take the over on 65.5 here, just betting on, what New Mexico has allowed and how much they've scored so far in all of their matchups.
I like it. Staying in the Big Ten, going up to Madison, Wisconsin at home, welcoming in the Nittany Lions of Penn State. James Franklin team currently a 6.5-point favorite. This one's pretty simple. I trust what Penn State does in any game outside of Ohio State and Michigan. I think that Penn State on the road, you're giving me this game at less than a touchdown. Give me the Nittany Lions minus 6.5.
Yeah, that feels fishy. It feels too good to be true in a sense.
So
my
naturally
number 3,
take Wisconsin money line.
My number 3, I'm going to LSU traveling to Texas A&M. It's gonna be a tough game. It's at night there in College Station. A&M has looked, much better after beating Missouri there. But I think this is a game where I'm just going to roll with the better quarterback, which is Garrett Nussmeier. So I'll take the Tigers plus 2.5 here.
LSU 0-3 in their last 3 trips to College Station.
So they're due.
So they're due. Yeah, break the streak here. I'm going to go back down to Big 12 country. I'm going up there to, I believe it's the Sunflower State. Is that right? Kansas?
That's correct.
Jayhawks and Wildcats. Kansas State game's going to be played up there in Manhattan. This line has climbed all the way up to 10.5. I like Chris Kleiman. I think they got the better quarterback. They got the better defense. Give me the Wildcats minus 10.5 in this rivalry matchup.
That one before the season should have been for some Big 12 title application.
You certainly thought so.
Yeah, and the Jayhawks have fallen off a cliff. My number 4, Notre Dame versus Navy, game being played in MetLife Stadium in New York City. The service academies and the troops have not let me down so far this year. They have in the past, but not this year. I'm sticking with the over here, 51.5. Notre Dame has a really good pass defense, but Navy's not going to pass the ball all that much. So we'll root for points and the troops to continue not letting me down.
Chad Gamble in the chat. Andy Ludwig, ? Any thoughts? He just resigned from his post at Utah. So I'd say cross him off the list.
We were going to talk about him until he resigned. And
he was on the list.
Not going to happen. So,
all right, pick number 4 for me. I'm staying in the Big 12, Adam. Going from 2 teams that we thought was going to have Big 12 championship implications. I think that this is one where the home team is possibly a dark horse for the Big 12 title as well. Can't believe we're saying that. Cincinnati going up to Boulder to take on Colorado. Dion currently a 5.5-point favorite over the Bearcats. Colorado's rolling right now. And I think that the fact that this is going to be a late night kickoff, Boulder's going to be juiced up. They're going to be ready to go. Travis Hunter's going to be healthy. Shedeur Sanders throwing the ball on offense. Give me the Buffs minus 5.5.
My final pick here, speaking of Andy Ludwig and Utah, that's a team that can't score right now. They're traveling on the road to Houston, another team that can't score. 2 solid defenses to pair with that as well. So I'm taking the under here, 36.5.
All right, Adam, pick number 5 for me. You wanted to talk Ole Miss and the trip to Oxford. Let's talk Rebels and Sooners. Oklahoma making the travel out there, trying to break the streak, trying to avoid this thing from going to 3 consecutive losses. Ole Miss currently 20.5-point favorite. Who would have ever thought that Oklahoma would be a 3-touchdown underdog on the road? Didn't think I would see it in my lifetime, but here we are. Adam, this one's plain and simple for me. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I've made a pretty decent amount of cheddar in the first 3 matchups. Oklahoma gets an SEC opponent taking the other team to cover. This is no different for me. All the different problems that Ole Miss presents, especially with what they do defensively. We saw how bad Oklahoma's offense has looked over the last 2 to 3 weeks, especially how bad our offensive line is. I think it was 4 different offensive lines that we played against South Carolina. You're not going to be able to build any continuity. You're not going to be able to get any confidence from that group or from your quarterback as well. I think that this is a bad matchup. Rebels are coming off of a bye week and they're moving into the back half of the schedule where Lane Kiffin knows that they've got to make a charge. They've got to get firing on all cylinders with what's coming down the pipeline for them. I do not see this getting any better for Oklahoma. I think that this is a rout. I think that this is an Ole Miss blowout. Give me Ole Miss in the 20.5.
And your score prediction, I guess you can just roll right into that.
Ole Miss 41, Oklahoma 13. If we score 13 points, job well done. I guess it's a step in the right direction.
Yeah. In terms of my score prediction for this game and how I think it's going to play out, it is interesting because it is an 11 a.m. game at Ole Miss. They are coming off the bye week, but they looked really sluggish in that time slot against Kentucky. The fan base is notorious for being a little bit late arriving to those games, understandably so. So I think that favors Oklahoma a little bit. And if you can get off to a better start and have your offense in better positions rather than playing catch-up mode like you were against South Carolina. And it sounds weird, I think, to some fans to hear this, but after we saw Michael Hawkins look like a total freshman against South Carolina, I think I trust Jackson Arnold a little bit better to not put Oklahoma in terrible situations. Doesn't mean he's not going to do that potentially because we've already seen him do that against Tennessee. But I feel like Jackson Arnold, you can build a little bit of a game plan around. You can have some ideas of what you are able to do to be successful. And that is a little bit wider variety there. So is Oklahoma going to score 30? No. Are they going to score 20? I don't think so. But I think they'll be able to play a little bit better chess match with Ole Miss because the game won't get out of hand so fast. And so I still respect Oklahoma's defense. I think they'll be put in better positions here to also help out your offense and be able to play knowing that, hey, we have a chance maybe into the second quarter, maybe even into the third quarter potentially if things play out right for you. So I don't think it's going to be total just absolute annihilation. I just think Ole Miss is not the program that we thought they were coming into the season. But Oklahoma will have their work cut out for them offensively. Another defensive line that is excellent against the run, excellent at getting to the quarterback, and I don't think Oklahoma has any answers there. So I do have Oklahoma covering the spread. I have Ole Miss 30, Oklahoma 17. It's not going to feel that close. I think it's going to be completely sluggish. So feed Jacob Jordan. The sign reads for Tyler on the screen.
You're a lot more bullish than I am on this. I think that this is a rout.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think 30-17 is indicative of, hey, it's close, you're just 2 possessions away. I feel like that still feels insurmountable. It doesn't feel like a game where Oklahoma's really in it, but the score says it's a little bit closer just because I think Oklahoma takes care of the ball and is better able to protect the quarterback.
You realistically think that Oklahoma can score 17 points without the defense getting involved?
No, I kind of take into account the defense there a little bit.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Billy Bowman pick 6. Let's go.
Yeah, he called it on Twitter before the season. We'll see if it happens. So,
all right,
that's going to do it for us this evening here on the main line. We appreciate everyone. Lots of regulars in the chat again, like normal, listening live, watching live, and we appreciate everyone who makes this part of their weekly routine. We'll be back next week. I guess I will. Tyler will be on honeymoon, so he won't have to talk through the misery of another loss. But I'll be back to talk through everything that's going on in the world of Sooner sports, and we'll see you guys then.